Good afternoon, my fine feather friends. Welcome back to Vignette to Vogue, vlog entry number 8. We're moving right along. So guess what? It's March. It is Women's History Month, or what I would like to call Women's Her Story Month. Why do I say her story? Pretty obvious, his and hers. So I'm just going to start with just some general history about interior design. And this term I have brought up to you guys in the past, which is chinoiserie. So the reason why this particular term, this interior design term, is so important is because as I started to navigate the images that I love so much in terms of this project, this Vignette to Vogue, chinoiserie designs came up as something that I really love. So let's talk about what chinoiserie actually is. So in the past, I talked about some jewelry that I had that was in the style of chinoiserie. But chinoiserie really is a term. It is a French term that comes from the word chinoise, which is the French word for Chinese. So in the 17th century, as trade with Asia increased with Europe, Europeans came up with their own interpretation of the Chinese culture. So that's where the term chinoiserie comes from. And it is really kind of indicated by things that are of the Chinese culture, like Chinese geometrical form, certain elements of like pagodas, which is like architecturally Chinese design, as well as animals and dragons and pastoral or farm elements of the Chinese culture. So you'll see it in art, you'll see it in linens, you'll see it in upholstery fabric, you'll also see it in drapery fabric, as well as the actual artwork and wallpaper, right? So that brings us to where we are today. Take a look at the image behind me. And this image is so exciting to me because this image was a vignette that I found for a Black woman-owned interior design firm. That firm is called Casa, Vilora, and the principal designer for that firm is Veronica Solomon. And so I'm very inspired by her work. I think it was a couple of vlogs ago, we talked about minimalism and maximalism. Well, her name is Veronica, I'm sorry. She is a maximalist. And a lot of her design is inspired to me by chinoiserie because it came from like the 17th, 18th century. Our interior design in present day is very influenced by this particular style. So if you look at design right now, you'll see influence from chinoiserie because the European aristocracy really influenced how we design our interiors because, we come from the European background. So Veronica Solomon is a Black woman, and she is an interior designer. And I wanted to highlight some of her designs that I think are personally designed in the style of chinoiserie or inspired by that particular style. Things that include the pottery that looks very Asian in nature. If we look at the image behind us, she has the crane wallpaper, and I am wearing a crane top that is literally in the same form and fashion of the wallpaper that she had. This was an exciting vignette to Vogue for me because this was the first one where I found the literal translation. Now, let me say this. When I got the top, did it have the same vibrancy of the wallpaper? It did not, but it is literally the same print. I'm going to link the details for where the wallpaper came from in the description box below. But for right now, this tank literally is the same print as the wallpaper, and it is chinoiserie, right? Also on my arm, I have on these chinoiserie bamboo bracelets. So, of course, bamboo is indigenous to Asia, and we see it here now, but traditionally, probably in the 17th century, it was an Asian crop. So, bamboo jewelry, bamboo mirrors, the idea of bamboo is really inspired by the Asian culture. So that's why I have on these bracelets today. And oh my goodness, I forgot the most obvious things. Do I need glasses to see? I do at night to drive. But right now, these glasses represent something else, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. But right now, what I want to talk about is the influence of Asian culture or Chinese culture, and specifically to European culture. So yes, we talked about chinoiserie and how it is a Western interpretation of the Chinese culture. So does that mean that it is cultural appropriation? Well, in 2025, the Chinese people would say yes, because they pretty much took what they thought the Chinese culture meant and reinterpreted it, but it doesn't necessarily hold the same traditions that it held for the Chinese people at the time. So I think that the European people that came in contact with the culture really they were inspired by it, but they didn't get more context into why what the pagodas meant or what the Chinese geometrical patterns meant. But I wanted to put in some visuals of what chinoiserie looks like, because when I go into my Pinterest boards to see different runes and vignettes, what I'm noticing is that chinoiserie is my number one element that I like to translate into a Vogue look, from the vignette to the Vogue. So take a look at some of these chinoiserie inspired spaces. Some are just garden stools, because garden stools tend to come in this Asian inspired look. They tend to have an Asian inspired either geometry or the way that they're designed. Also take a look at some of the wallpaper, the animal elements that are probably native to China that they were interpreting as, chinoiserie through the European lens. This is what I wanted us to talk about today, because I talked about it before. And I think a little bit later, I'm going to talk about the other chinoiserie jewelry that I have that does also have those elements of the Asian culture. So in no way, shape, or form does this vlog intend to offend Asian culture by minimalizing it into a European interpretation. It just has become so much a part of what we do as interior designers, as illustrated by the Casa Vilora and Miss Solomon's interpretation. It just is a part of what we do, particularly here in America when we're designing spaces. It has influenced us because it's been a part of European culture since the 17th and 18th century. We're just now figuring out that it is something that could be considered cultural appropriation, and we're doing more research to figure out exactly how we can make sure that we pay homage to the culture without just kind of ripping it off and reinterpreting it in a way that is aesthetically pleasing for us. So I enjoy chinoiserie. I think it's one of the most beautiful ways to interpret a space in the Chinese culture. But I can also acknowledge that it might not be the most historically accurate way to interpret it. And for that, I want to make sure, because cultural appropriation in this day and age is not what we want to do. We want to understand the roots of it, but we also want to fix it if we can and make sure that the culture that it comes from originally is honored respectively. So today I have on my dragon earrings, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more where we go into our hallway runway, as I call it, and we reinterpret the look based on the actual image behind us. But today in this vlog, we're talking about chinoiserie. We're defining it. We're declaring that it could be considered culturally insensitive, but we're moving forward in it and honoring the culture that it came from. Thank you guys for joining me today for Vignette to Vogue.
Those glasses mimic the washer and dryer. Red lip color, red floral color. Cranes on the tank, cranes on the wallpaper. We have our serpentine necklace as well as our dragon earrings mimicking the serpentine dragon mirror on the wall. We have our bamboo bracelets, and the black pants pick up the color in the washer and dryer. We also have our black and white heels, which mimic the black and white tile on the floor. It's Vignette to Vogue, baby.